The Nexus Trade Station hung in the void like a glittering jewel, a sprawling metropolis of steel and light suspended in the blackness of space. It was a marvel of galactic engineering, a neutral hub where species from across 17 star systems converged to trade, negotiate, and occasionally glare at one another with barely concealed hostility. The station was a microcosm of the universe's delicate balance, a place where predators and prey conducted business under the watchful eyes of heavily armed peacekeepers, all while pretending they weren't sizing each other up for dinner. The central marketplace buzzed with frenetic energy. Merchants shouted in a cacophony of languages, hawking everything from bioluminescent spices to quantum processors of dubious origin. The air was thick with the mingled scents of alien cuisines, chemical pheromones, and the faint tang of recycled atmosphere. Security drones hummed overhead, their AI systems scanning for the telltale signs of violence, a raised claw, a bared fang, or a subtle shift in posture that signaled an impending brawl. The station's management had learned the hard way that nothing ruined a trading day like a diplomatic envoy being reduced to a pile of regrets. At the heart of this controlled chaos stood Vexthul, a Scarith warrior whose very presence sent ripples of unease through the crowd. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, his exoskeleton gleamed a deep, predatory blue, each segment perfectly articulated for both protection and lethal precision. His 6 limbs moved with a fluid grace that belied their capacity for violence, for ending in appendages that could switch from delicate manipulation to razor-sharp talons in an instant. His head, a nightmarish cluster of sensory organs, scanned the environment with relentless efficiency, heat sensors tracking heartbeats, chemical analyzers sniffing out fear, motion detectors catching the faintest twitch of a potential target. Vexthul was an apex predator, a product of millions of years of Scarith evolution. His species had clawed their way to the top of their homeworld's food chain, and they wore their dominance like a badge of honor. Mercy was a foreign concept to them, a weakness that evolution had long since culled from their gene pool. Vexthul himself had terminated over 300 sentient beings in his 2-century lifespan, a record that earned him both respect among his peers and a substantial bounty from interstellar law enforcement. He cared little for either. To him, both were natural consequences of his superiority. Today, he stalked the marketplace with purpose, his sensory organs cataloging potential prey with the cold precision of a machine. The Nexus Trade Station was a hunter's paradise, a 3-dimensional maze of walkways, transit tubes, and crowded stalls, all teeming with life forms of every conceivable variety. The noise drowned out screams, the crowds hid bodies, and the station's neutral policies stripped prey of their usual defenses. It was, in Vexthul's mind, the perfect hunting ground. As he moved, the crowd parted instinctively. Prey species scurried to find urgent business elsewhere, their eyes darting nervously. Even other predators, lesser ones, in Vexthul's estimation, gave him a wide berth, their instincts recognizing a superior threat. The station's security forces tracked him via their surveillance network, but made no move to intervene. Vexthul had committed no crimes within their jurisdiction, and his presence served a useful purpose. It kept the station's more unruly elements in check. Nothing enforced order quite like the shadow of an apex predator. Vexthul's sensory organs swept the marketplace, analyzing potential targets with the dispassionate efficiency of a being born to kill. A cluster of vulnerary merchants caught his attention, their translucent skin pulsing with nervous bioluminescence. Their defensive acid secretions made them a tricky proposition, but Vexthul had dealt with their kind before. A quick strike, too. Their nerve clusters could neutralize them. Though it would require preparation, he hadn't brought nearby. A family of Korath ambled past, their fur rippling with color changes that betrayed their emotional state. The adults would be formidable, their pack instincts making them dangerous in numbers, but the juveniles were vulnerable. Vexthul filed them away as a possibility, though the inevitable retaliation from the pack made them less than ideal. His attention shifted to a solitary in the food court, picking at a bowl of fermented plant matter. The insectoid's natural armor and rapid reflexes posed a challenge, but Vexthul knew their weaknesses. A precise strike to the joint between head and thorax would bypass their defenses entirely. This was a moderate risk, high-reward target exactly, the kind of prey that appealed to his refined taste. As he continued his sweep, Vexthul's instincts catalogued a dozen other species, Telconni engineers with fragile but fast bodies, more Vex traders with slow but regenerative physiology, and countless others, each presenting a unique puzzle to solve. The Nexus Trade Station was a buffet of biodiversity, and Vexthul was a connoisseur of carnage. He moved closer to a commotion. Near a merchant's stall, where a Drauri trader and a Quilian merchant were locked in a heated negotiation. Their aggressive posturing suggested the situation could escalate, providing perfect cover for a kill. But then, something made him pause. A faint chemical signature tickled his sensors, barely perceptible but unmistakable. It was familiar, yet elusive, a scent he had encountered before but never fully categorized. His multiple eyes narrowed, scanning the crowd for the source. The marketplace churned around him, a sea of bodies and voices, but his focus sharpened to a razor's edge. Something was here, something that didn't fit the usual hierarchy of predator and prey. It took several moments for Vexthul's sophisticated sensory apparatus to pinpoint the source. When he did, his first instinct was to dismiss it. The creature was small, barely 2 meters tall, with no visible defenses. Its pale, pinkish skin and sparse body hair suggested a species adapted to a benign environment. It moved through the crowd with a casual gait, showing none of the alertness that marked experienced prey. By all accounts, it was a Category 5 target, the lowest threat level in Vexthul's system, reserved for the elderly, infirm, or simply incompetent. But something was wrong. The creature's movements were too relaxed, too confident for a prey species in the presence of an apex predator. Most sentient beings had some form of threat detection, even if subconscious, yet this one showed no signs of registering Vexthul's presence. Its breathing was steady, its heartbeat regular, its chemical emission stable. Either it was the most oblivious creature in the galaxy, or it was something else entirely. Vexthul's sensory organs focused intently, cross-referencing the creature's characteristics against his database. Bipedal, bilaterally symmetrical, mammalian traits. It matched several species, but none perfectly. As he observed, subtle details emerged. The creature's eyes moved constantly, tracking multiple targets with a precision that suggested training or paranoia. Its hands, soft at first glance, bore calluses that hinted at familiarity with tools or weapons. Most telling was its positioning. It stood in a way that maximized sight lines while minimizing approach vectors, a tactic Vexthul recognized from his own hunting strategies. This was no prey species. The realization hit Vexthul like a shockwave. This creature wasn't oblivious, it was confident, secure in a way that only an apex predator could be. His memory banks accessed a rarely used file, one compiled from survivor reports and whispered intelligence briefings. The word formed in his mind like a curse: human. Terror, an emotion Vexthul hadn't felt since his juvenile years, seeped into his consciousness. Humans were not just apex predators, they were the apex predators, the pinnacle of the galactic food chain. Every other species, from the titanium-rending Dromori to the berserker Krex, feared them. The Thorgan Empire, conquerors of 300 worlds, had signed a non-aggression pact with humanity that was essentially a surrender. Humans defied evolutionary logic. They lacked natural weapons, armor, or exceptional senses, yet they dominated. Through intelligence, adaptability, and a psychological profile that chilled even the most hardened predators, humans didn't hunt for survival alone. They hunted for sport, for principle, for reasons no other species could fathom. They had turned violence into an art form, while mastering diplomacy to a degree that made their enemies question their sanity. Most terrifying was their persistence. While other predators relied on speed or strength, humans simply never gave up. They would track prey across star systems, through decades, with a patience that drove other species to madness. The human in question was engaged in a transaction with a Valkyrie merchant, examining a collection of decorative trinkets. To the casual observer, it looked like a tourist browsing souvenirs. But Vexthul's sensors picked up the truth, the subtle tension in its muscles, the way it positioned itself to monitor multiple threats, the casual scan of the environment that screamed tactical awareness. This wasn't just a human, this was a human with training, experience, and likely a body count that dwarfed Vexthul's. Sweat beaded on Vexthul's exoskeleton, a physiological response he hadn't experienced in decades. His multiple hearts raced, his body priming for a fight-or-flight response he hadn't needed since his youth. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, to put as much distance as possible between himself and this creature. But his predatory pride rebelled. How could he, an apex predator, retreat from something that looked like it belonged in a low-threat category? Yet his rational mind, analyzing the human's capabilities, provided a litany of reasons to withdraw. This was no ordinary encounter. The human's posture shifted slightly, suggesting it had noticed him. Its breathing changed by a fraction, indicating heightened awareness. It knew he was there and it was choosing to ignore him, dismissing him as irrelevant. The psychological blow was almost as devastating as the physical threat. Being ignored by prey was humiliating. Being ignored by the galaxy's premier predator was a wound to Vexthul's very identity. His survival instincts overrode his pride, and he began a strategic withdrawal, moving with the precision of a creature who knew that any sudden motion could trigger a response he wasn't prepared to handle. The irony wasn't lost on him. He, who had cleared rooms with his presence, was retreating from a creature that most would dismiss as harmless. The human continued its shopping, haggling over trinkets with the Valkyrie merchant, its demeanor one of casual indifference. Other patrons began to notice the odd scene. A Scarith warrior, the stuff of nightmares, visibly rattled, while the unremarkable biped causing his distress browsed souvenirs. Some prey species, sensing the disruption in the natural order, edged away from the human. Others, driven by curiosity, moved closer, their survival instincts warring with their fascination. The Valkyrie merchant, oblivious to the drama, continued to pitch his wares, extolling the virtues of his trinkets. But Vexthul's sensors picked up details that painted a different picture. The human's questions revealed knowledge of material science. Its evaluation of the goods showed professional assessment, and its relaxed posture never crossed into vulnerability. This was no tourist, this was an operative, conducting reconnaissance under the guise of shopping. The realization hit Vexthul like a collapsing star. He wasn't just in the presence of a human, he was facing a human operative, likely gathering intelligence on the station's layout, security, and population. The kind of human who appeared in classified briefings that made even the bravest predators reconsider their career choices. Vexthul's retreat was a master class in dignified panic. He extracted himself from the marketplace without triggering the chaos that typically accompanied his departures, though his hurried steps drew curious glances. The human, meanwhile, completed its purchase, a small decorative sculpture that wouldn't look out of place on a suburban coffee table. It paid with galactic credits, left a polite tip, and thanked the merchant in flawless Valkyrie trade dialect before strolling away, studying a directory map for the nearest restroom. The exchange lasted 15 minutes, but its impact rippled through the station. As word spread, reactions varied. Prey species reevaluated their place in the galactic hierarchy, wondering what it meant that a Scarith warrior had been reduced to a nervous wreck by a creature that looked like a bureaucrat. Other predators took note, making discreet inquiries about the human's identity, but keeping their distance. The station's security forces updated their threat protocols, assigning the human a code Crimson status, reserved for entities that could destabilize entire systems through sheer presence. Vexthul, the apex predator, sought therapy at first for the station's medical facilities, which had never treated an existential crisis in a creature designed for dominance. His symptoms included paranoia, anxiety, and a tendency to flinch at shadows that might be humans in disguise. The human, oblivious to the chaos it had caused, was last seen in the food court, eating a grilled cheese sandwich and reading what might have been a technical manual or a recipe book. It departed the station via commercial transport, leaving behind a trail of psychological wreckage and a legend that would be whispered among predators for generations. The Nexus Trade Station resumed its chaotic rhythm, but the incident left an indelible mark. The philosophers, ever the observers of galactic irony, noted that the universe had a sense of humor. The most dangerous predators weren't those with claws or fangs, but those who had transcended the need to look dangerous. The human, with its unremarkable appearance and casual demeanor, had redefined the food chain in a single, mundane transaction. Vexthul would never be the same. His confidence, once unshakable, was now riddled with doubt. He questioned every shadow, every scent, every bipedal figure that crossed his path. The galaxy, in its infinite wisdom, had reminded him that even apex predators could become prey when faced with something that defied the rules of evolution. And so, the cosmic dance continued. The Nexus Trade Station buzzed with life, its inhabitants navigating the delicate balance of commerce and survival. But in the back of every predator's mind lingered a new fear, not of claws or venom, but of a species that could unravel their world with nothing more than a sandwich and a smile.